Okay, we're looking at decimals review. Now, we can often see numbers with decimal points. Not all numbers are whole numbers. For example, we might have 325.673. That number has a decimal point. Now, when we see numbers with a decimal point, they're actually made up of a whole number part and a decimal part. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put that an example of a number, for example 327.692, for example. Now you already know 327, that 3 is in the hundreds place, the 2 is in the tens place, and the 7 is in the ones place. But after the ones there is always a decimal point. Now, this 327 is the whole number part, and after the decimal point, we have this point 692. That 692 bit is the decimal part. Now, if you look here at the place values, we've got 100, and if you divide 100 by 10, you get 10, and if you divide 10 by 10, you get 1, and then we've got our decimal point. And now if you keep dividing by 10, we've got 1 divided by 10 is 1 over 10. And if you divide, and that's called, 1 over 10 is called a tenth. And if you divide a tenth by 10, you get a hundredth. And that's 1 over 100. And if you divide 100 by 10, you get 1 over 1,000. So with our place value, we've got hundreds, tens, ones, then we have our decimal point. Then we have tenths. Now notice that's different to tens. Tenths is small, it's 1 over 10, it's 1/10. That's why it's called tenths, because it's 1/10. Hundredths, because we've got 1/100th. So remember they end in with the THS on the end. And thousandth here, we've got the 1,000th column. So if we look at the 6, that means we've got 6/10. If we look at this 9 here, it means we've got 900ths. And if we look at the 2 here, we've got 2,000ths. So, as I said before, the 327 is the whole number part. Then we've got the point, and what's after the point is all the decimal part. And the decimal columns start with tenths, then hundredths, then thousandths. There is no once column, okay? So we go 100, 10, 1, then we go smaller and we go tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Okay, the type of question that you might get might be something like this. What is the value, what is the value of the 3 in 67.138? Now I'm going to come back down here and I'm going to put my 67.138 down here. Now, obviously you won't always have a table like this that you can use, but if we look at this, we can see that the 6 is in the tens column because it's 60. The 7 is in the ones column. Then we go, there's the decimal point. Then we've got the tenths column, the hundredths column, and the eighths column. So the value of the 3 is 3 hundredths because it's in the hundredths column. So we write, because you can see down here, 3 is in the hundredths column. So the value of the 3 will be 3 over 100, or 3 hundredths. Okay, looking at this question down here, the value of the 8 in that same number. Remember, here I've written the number down here, 67.138. We can see that the 8 is in the thousandths column, or if you didn't have this table over here, we'd say, right, the units, the decimal point, we've got the tenths, the 3 is in the hundredths column, and the 8 is in the thousandths column. Therefore, the value of the 8 is 8 thousandths. So we write that as 8 over 1,000. That's how we write 8 thousandths. Now, the value of the 1 in 67.138. Again, we've got the tens, the units, the decimal point, and the 1 is in that first column after the decimal point, and that's the tenth column. So the value of the 1 is 1/10. Now, looking at this last question here, the value of the 6. Now that's in the tens column. So it's worth 6 lots of 10, which is 60. Remember the number is 67.138. So the value of the 6 is 60. So they're my examples there. just pause the video and why don't you try these questions over here where it says your turn. Once you've finished those questions, you can restart the video. Okay, hopefully you've done that now. Let's look at these questions. What is the value of 1 in this number, 374.921? Now, I can write that number over here, or we can just look at each of the columns. So we've got 374, that's the whole number part. Then we've got the decimal point. The first column is the tenths, then the hundredths, then the thousandths. So because 1 is in the thousandths column, the value of 1 is 1,000th, like it's 1 over 1,000. So it's 1 in the thousandths column. The value of the 9. The 374 is the whole number part. Then we've got the decimal point. The 9 is in the tenths column. So the value of the 9 should be 9/10 because it's in the tenths column. Now the value of the 2 here, 374 again is the whole number part. Then we've got 9 in the tenths column and 2 is in the hundredths column. So the value of the 2 is 2 hundredths, or 2 over 100. And in this last question, the value of the 7, we've got 374. The value of the 7, because it's in the tens column, is 70. Or you can hear it when you say it, 370. So that 4. So the 7 stands for 70. Okay, we'll move to the next section. Actually, before you go to the next section, I'd like you to go to your textbook. You can go to page 170 of your textbook, exercise 4G, and you should be able to try questions 1, 2, and 3, as you can just see there. So once you've done these questions 1, 2, and 3, you can turn to the answer section of your textbook and please mark those questions. Okay, when you're finished that, we'll go back to your sheets. Now for the next section of the worksheet, zeros. Girls, when you see zeros at the end of whole numbers, they're very, very important. However, zeros at the end of a decimal do not change the value of a decimal. I'm going to show you a whole number, for example. Let's say we've got 27 and I put a 0 on the end. 270 is very different to 27, and so is 2,700. It's very different to 27. So zeros on the end of whole numbers change the value of the whole number. However, zeros at the end of a decimal do not change the value of the decimal. So for example, 63.12, we've got 63 in the whole number part, and we've got 1 in the tenths column and 2 in the hundredths column. Well, that's the same as 63.120 because we've still got 63 in the whole number part. Then we've got our decimal point. We've got 1 in the tenths column, 2 in the hundredths column, just like over there, but nothing in the thousandths column. And if I add another 0, there's nothing in the 10,000ths column. So having zeros at the end of a decimal do not change the value of the decimal. So just looking over here at your turn, for example, 45.6 would be the same as, say, I'll just go to red. It would be the same as 45.6. So here, 45.60, we've got 45 in the whole number part, the decimal point, 6 in the tenths column, and nothing in the hundredths column. Well, this number I've written here is exactly the same. 45 in the whole number part, there's my decimal point, 6 in the tenths column, and I've got nothing in the hundredths column. Now that would be the same as something like this, 45.600. 45 is the whole number part, the decimal point, and 6 in the tenths column, and I've got nothing in the hundredths column and nothing in the thousandths column. So all these numbers here are exactly the same. Now, next section, decimal places. Decimal places, what does it mean? What it is that we have to count the number of digits after the decimal point. That tells us the number of decimal places in our number. So the reason it's after the decimal point, remember, before the decimal point, you've got the whole number part. And it's not till after the decimal that you have the decimal part of your number. Remember, 3 is in the whole number bit and the 5, 6 is in the decimal part. So this is why that number 3.56 will have 2 decimal places, because it's got 2 digits after the decimal point. And the bit after the decimal point is the decimal part of the number. And of course, the bit before the decimal point is the whole part. Looking at the next question, we've got 322 is the whole number part, then our decimal point, and 1 is the decimal part. So it only has 1 decimal place because there's 1 number after the point. And looking at our last number there, now girls, I know the 0 does not change the value of the decimal. But you still do have 1, 2, 3, 4 digits after the decimal point. So this number here still has 4 decimal places because there are 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers after the decimal point. So girls, why don't you pause the video now and just attempt these 2 questions over here. So please write the number of decimal places for each of those 2 numbers there. Okay, hopefully you've already done this. Remember, 23 is the whole number part. There's our decimal point, and then we've got 1, 2, 3 digits after the decimal point. So therefore, this first number has 3 decimal places. And the second number, 36783, is my whole number part. There's my decimal point, and there the 27 is in the decimal part of the number, so I've got 2 decimal places, because we've got 2 numbers after the decimal point. Okay, girls, there aren't really many questions that you can look at from the textbook regarding these 2 areas here. So we're just going to go on to the next section. Okay, comparing decimals. Now, girls, to compare decimals more easily, there are actually 2 methods that you can use. I'm going to explain the first method, and then we're going to look at the method that's explained over here. So if I look at these 2 numbers, let's look at the whole number bit. 63 for this number here, 63 for that number there. They're exactly the same for the whole number bit. Then we've got the decimal point for both of them. And then they've both got a 1 in the first decimal place, or in the 10th column. But then this number over here actually doesn't have anything else after that. So if we had to look at the hundredths column, for example, like I said, the whole number part's the same. In the tenths column, we've got 1s, but this number over here has nothing in the hundredths column. But this number over here, 63.11, sorry, has a 1 in the hundredths column. The other thing you can say is, well, 63.10 is after the point, and for this number over here, we've got 63.11, so this one's got 11 after the point, so we can say that the 63.11 is bigger than 63.10. Now, notice I've added in a 0 there, so to actually compare decimals more easily, you can insert zeros at the end of decimals because it doesn't change their value. But if they've both got 2 decimal places, or 2 digits after the decimal point, you can actually compare them a lot easier by reading 63.10, 63.11, and then we know that this 11 one is bigger than that 10 one. So remember, the big open mouth faces the bigger number. Okay, you attempt the next question over here, 1.09 and 1.009, and please insert a greater than or less than symbol to make that statement true. Okay, once again, we can compare each part. So the whole number part, the 1 is the same, then we've got the decimal point. Then in the tenths column, we've got a 0 here and a 0 there. But in the hundredths column, this one's got a 9 and that one's got a 0. So therefore, this first number here must be bigger because it's got a 9 in the hundredths column, but this number, the second number, doesn't have anything in the hundredths column. Also, if you put a 0 on the end to make this have 3 decimal places like the other number, then we've got 1.090, which is 1.090, and this one is 1.009, or 1.0, like 1 and 0.009, which is smaller. Please go to the next video for further instructions.